The Vexthara snipers for eyes tracked the human settlement through his thermal scope, each orb rotating independently to process different wavelengths of light. Krathavel had killed 300 sentients across 17 worlds, but humans were proving unexpectedly troublesome. Target acquired, he whispered into his comm unit, mandibles clicking with anticipation. Below, the mining colony of New Meridian stretched across the canyon floor like scattered dice on red sand. The humans had been extracting trilithium for 3 months, unaware that this world belonged to the Dominion. Female, approximately 20 standard years, dark hair, tactical gear. Through his scope, he watched a lone figure move between the prefab structures with fluid precision. Lieutenant Vex Cortana had memorized her dossier after she'd eliminated his spotter 2 days ago. The human military's deadliest marksman, they said. Krathavel's throat sacs inflated with amusement. These soft-skinned mammals had no concept of true predation. The settlement appeared defenseless in the dying light of Kepler-440b's twin suns. Miners continued their shifts, children played in the compound yard, and security patrols followed predictable patterns. Intelligence suggested 47 combatants, mostly colonial militia with outdated pulse rifles, against his strike force of 200 elite Dominion warriors. It would be a massacre. Krathavel adjusted his position on the rocky outcropping, his chameleonic skin shifting to match the crimson stone. His rifle a Nexus-class particle beam weapon capable of punching through starship armor hummed with contained energy. The shot was clean, 800 meters, minimal wind, perfect line of sight. But something nagged at his predator's instincts. In 40 years of hunting, he'd learned to trust the electric tingle along his spine when prey became dangerous. The human female moved wrong, to confident, to aware. Sir, came the voice of his tactical coordinator. The main assault begins in 30 minutes. Shall I mark your target eliminated? Krathavel's finger caressed the trigger. Through the scope, Cortana paused beside a supply depot, her head turning fractionally in his direction. For one impossible moment, her eyes seemed to look directly into his. Then she smiled. The sniper's blood went cold. At this distance, with his camouflage and elevated position, visual detection was impossible. Yet that smile held the lazy confidence of a predator who'd already spotted her prey. Negative, he breathed into his comm. Target is suspicious. I'm relocating. He began to ease back from his firing position when movement caught his peripheral vision. A glint of metal on the ridge to his left, exactly where he would position a counter-sniper to cover this approach. His heart hammered against his chest plate as training took over. Never expose yourself to unknown threats. Always have an exit strategy. Krathavel low-crawled backward, using every technique drilled into him at the Dominion's elite combat schools. His rifle scraped softly against stone. As he maneuvered toward secondary cover, the humans couldn't have detected him. Their technology was primitive, their tactics crude. And yet, a pebble rolled down the slope behind him. His world exploded into motion. Krathavel spun, bringing his rifle around in a combat turn that should have given him advantage over any pursuing enemy. His four eyes processed the scene in microseconds. A figure in mottled combat gear crouched where he'd been lying just moments before. A human sniper rifle trained on his previous position. The human woman looked up from her scope and winked. "Hello, handsome," Vex Cortana said, her voice carrying the casual tone of someone discussing weather. "Beautiful evening for a hunt, isn't it?" Krathavel's rifle was already swinging toward her when she moved, not the clumsy scramble he expected from a two-eyed biped, but a fluid roll that took her behind cover while simultaneously bringing her weapon to bear. His particle beam seared the air where she'd been, superheating stone into glass. The assault begins in 28 minutes. His coordinator's voice crackled through his comm. Status report. Krathavel didn't answer. He was too busy trying to understand how a human had flanked him without triggering a single motion sensor. Below, in the colony, lights began winking out in a pattern that looked random but felt orchestrated. The human female had vanished into the gathering darkness like smoke, leaving only the echo of her laughter and the growing certainty that he was no longer the hunter. He was the hunted, the night vision systems built into HFY's combat suit painted the world in shades of green and gold, but somehow the human woman had become invisible. She'd been there, right there, and then the shadows had swallowed her like she'd never existed. His comm unit whispered with tactical updates. Hunter 1. Advanced teams report no resistance at the perimeter. Beginning infiltration phase. HFY pressed himself against the canyon wall, his rifle sweeping methodically across firing lanes. The colony below had gone dark except for essential systems, creating a maze of light and shadow that could hide a dozen snipers. Standard doctrine demanded he relocate to his tertiary position and provide overwatch for the assault, but abandoning his hunting ground felt like retreat. A soft metallic click echoed from somewhere behind him. He spun toward the sound, particle beam charging with a whine that seemed thunderous in the silence. Nothing, just wine-carved stone and the distant glow of Kepler-4 binary stars. His thermal sensors showed ambient heat signatures cooling rock, small nocturnal creatures. The fading warmth of his own footprints. Jumpy tonight, aren't we? The voice came from directly above him. HFY threw himself sideways as a human. Sniper rifle barked, the chemical propellant round missing his head by centimeters. He rolled to his feet, bringing his weapon around in a killing arc, but she was already gone. A climbing rope dangled from the cliff face above. She'd rappelled down behind his position, while he'd been focused on the wrong direction. How? He snarled into the darkness. Her laughter drifted from somewhere to his left. You really want to know? Your species thinks in straight lines. Point A to point B, cause and effect, predator and prey. Humans think in spirals. Another muzzle flash lit the night, and stone exploded beside his shoulder. HFY returned fire, his particle beam carving molten furrows through solid rock. The backscatter painted his surroundings in strobing light, revealing nothing but empty stone and shadow. His tactical display showed friendly forces advancing on the colony perimeter. 200 elite Dominion warriors against 47 human defenders. The mathematics were simple, but mathematics didn't account for the growing dread in his chest. Your friends are about to have a very bad night. Cortana's voice seemed to come from multiple directions at once. See, while you've been playing peekaboo up here, I've been setting up a few surprises. HFY's comm unit exploded with panic transmissions. Contact front, multiple snipers, taking fire from elevated positions. They knew we were coming. Through his scope, he watched tracers arc across the colony like deadly fireworks. His assault teams were pinned down in the open ground, caught between carefully prepared kill zones. The humans hadn't been sleeping, they'd been waiting. Impossible. He breathed. Our intelligence was perfect. The colony was undefended. Your intelligence was what we wanted you to see. A boot scraped on stone somewhere behind him. Did you really think we wouldn't notice 100 aliens massing in the hills? We've been tracking your heat signatures for 3 days. HFY spun toward the sound, but his rifle found only empty air. She was ghost walking, using terrain and timing to stay ahead of his reactions. It was a technique that required perfect knowledge of the ground and an almost supernatural ability to predict enemy movement. The miners, the children, safe in the underground shelters, along with 150 colonial Marines who arrived yesterday. Her rifle spoke again, and his left shoulder plate sparked as the round glanced off. Welcome to humanity's idea of a surprise party. The tactical situation collapsed around him like a house of cards. His assault force was trapped in prepared positions, taking casualties from enemies who seemed to materialize from thin air. Below, explosions bloomed as improvised devices tore through Dominion ranks. What should have been a simple extermination had become a meat grinder. HFY made a desperate decision. He activated his suit's emergency beacon and began broadcasting on all frequencies. All units, abort mission. Repeat, abort mission. The colony is. Pain exploded through his wrist as a precisely placed shot shattered his comm unit. Sparks cascaded from the ruined electronics, cutting him off from his forces. In the sudden silence that followed, he could hear the distant screams of his warriors dying in the valley below. Now that's just rude, Cortana said from somewhere very, very close. Leaving without saying goodbye, HFY turned slowly. his eyes finally focusing on a figure crouched on a ledge barely 3 meters away. She held his rifle in her hands, his rifle, the weapon that had never left his side for 20 years of warfare. The particle beam projector was aimed directly at his chest. "When?" he whispered. "About 5 minutes ago, while you were busy shooting at shadows." She examined the alien weapon with professional interest. "Nice piece of hardware. Bit heavy for my taste, but the targeting system is elegant. You disarmed me while I was shooting at you. I disarmed you while you were shooting at echoes." Her smile held no warmth. Sound carries strangely in these canyons. A girl can be in a lot of places at once if she knows the acoustics. BlackHFY's secondary weapons were still holstered at his belt, but he could read death in her posture. She'd already calculated every move he might make. "My forces will kill every human in that colony," he said. "Your forces are dying." She tilted her head toward the valley, where the sounds of battle were growing fainter. 3-to-1 odds aren't much good when you're the ones walking into the ambush. The sniper blinked. She was already behind him, and the world went dark. BlackHFY awoke to the taste of his own blood and the sound of distant gunfire. His head pounded where Cortana had struck him with his own rifle, and his eyes struggled to focus in the pre-dawn gloom. She'd bound his hands with military-grade restraints and propped him against a boulder overlooking the colony. The battle below had transformed into something from his worst nightmares. Bodies littered the approach routes where his assault teams had been caught in crossfire. Dominion warriors, elite soldiers who'd conquered 17 worlds, lay twisted and broken among improvised obstacles that channeled them into kill zones. The humans had used their mining equipment to create a fortress of overturned crawlers and excavation barriers, turning the entire colony into an interlocking network of defensive positions. "Status report," he croaked. Cortana sat nearby, field stripping her rifle with mechanical precision. 67 of your friends are dead. Another 43 are wounded and pinned down in the eastern ravine. The rest seem to have developed a sudden interest in retreating. The mathematics hit him like a physical blow. In 6 hours of fighting, the humans had decimated nearly half his force. Impossible. We have superior technology, superior training, superior arrogance. She slotted a fresh magazine into her weapon with a sharp click. You came here expecting to slaughter civilians. Instead, you found the 15th Colonial Marine Regiment, waiting with a year's worth of preparation and a serious grudge against alien invaders. Through his scope now in Cortana's hands, BlackHFY could see his surviving warriors. Trapped in a natural depression, they'd sought cover from the withering crossfire. But the humans had anticipated even that. Smoke grenades tumbled into the ravine, followed by the distinctive whine of flechette rounds designed to shred anything in their path. "We monitored your communications for weeks," Cortana continued, her voice conversational despite the carnage below. "Every tactical frequency, every supply drop, every reconnaissance report. Did you really think we wouldn't learn your language? Humans are very good at languages." A new horror crystallized in his mind. The mining operation was real, initially. But when our deep space monitors detected your fleet massing in the outer system, we decided to set a trap. She gestured toward the colony with casual pride. "Every building down there is hardened against orbital bombardment. Every civilian was evacuated 3 days ago. What you're attacking is essentially a military base disguised as a defenseless settlement." The implications were staggering. Human intelligence had known about the Dominion's plans from the beginning, had allowed them to approach, had let them commit to an assault before revealing the true nature of their defense. It was strategic thinking on a level that challenged everything he'd been taught about these primitive mammals. "Your people are monsters," he snarled. Cortana's expression hardened. "Our people are survivors. There's a difference." A massive explosion rocked the eastern ravine as hidden charges detonated among his trapped forces. The screams that followed weren't entirely alien. Pain was a universal language. Through the scope, he watched warriors he'd trained personally, dying in agony, their advanced armor useless against carefully placed explosives. "Let me contact them," he pleaded. "Let me order a surrender." No, her refusal was absolute. "Your forces have been broadcasting on every frequency, calling for orbital support. Your ships will glass this planet rather than accept defeat. The only way my people survive is if your people don't leave this canyon. As if summoned by her words, the dawn sky began to flicker with the telltale shimmer of ships, dropping out of faster-than-light travel. The Dominion fleet had arrived, 12 heavy cruisers and a dreadnought carrier. Enough firepower to sterilize a continent. Krathevil felt a surge of vindictive satisfaction. Now you understand true power. My fleet will reduce this world to ash before allowing humans to. Your fleet, Cortana interrupted, is about to receive some very interesting communications. She activated a portable transmitter, and suddenly the tactical frequencies filled with his own voice, audio recordings, digitally manipulated but perfect in every detail, began broadcasting emergency signals that painted a picture of total victory. His recorded voice reported the colony's destruction, the elimination of all human resistance, and a request for immediate extraction of survivors. Psychological warfare. She explained with clinical detachment, "We recorded your voice patterns during your approach. Amazing what human computers can do with a few hours of audio samples." The genius of it struck him like a physical blow. The fleet commanders would hear confirmation of mission success, would delay their orbital bombardment to allow ground forces to evacuate. By the time they realized the deception, it would be too late. "You're buying time," he said. "I'm buying survival." She stood, shouldering her rifle. "And while your ships are sorting out the confusion, my friends down there are going to finish what they started." The battle in the ravine had reached its crescendo. His remaining warriors, realizing they faced annihilation, had begun a desperate charge toward the colony's outer perimeter. It was suicide. But death with honor was preferable to death cowering in a hole. Cortana raised her rifle, the scope tracking the lead elements of the assault. "Your people fight well when cornered. I respect that. Then let them die as warriors, not trapped animals." She considered this for a moment, then keyed her radio. "All stations, this is Overwatch. Targets are advancing on positions Alpha through Echo. Let them come within 50 meters. Then open fire. Give them a chance to die standing up." It was a small mercy, but Krathevil felt something like gratitude. Below, his warriors emerged from cover in a final, doomed charge. They ran across open ground with the desperate courage of soldiers who knew they were already dead, their weapons blazing defiance at an enemy they could barely see. The human response was devastating and precise. Crossfire from multiple positions caught the assault in a web of destruction that left no survivors. But they died fighting, weapons in hand, facing their enemies. "It's done," Cortana said quietly, above them. The first shuttles began descending from the Dominion fleet, coming to collect an extraction force that no longer existed. In 30 minutes, maybe less, the deception would unravel and orbital bombardment would begin. But looking at Cortana's face, Krathevil suspected she had one more surprise waiting. The first Dominion shuttle touched down in a cloud of superheated dust, its landing thrusters scarring the canyon floor through captured optics. Cortana watched 20 elite shock troopers disembark, their powered armor gleaming in the morning light. They moved with the disciplined confidence of soldiers, expecting to collect their victorious comrades. "Beautiful, aren't they?" she murmured, adjusting her rifle's targeting system. "All that technology, all that training, and they still don't understand the first rule of warfare." Krathevil tested his restraints again, finding them as unyielding as before, which is, never trust your own intelligence reports. Her finger found the trigger, especially when the enemy wrote them. The lead shuttle exploded in a cascade of molten metal and screaming air. The anti-vehicle mine had been buried precisely where landing protocols would dictate touchdown, exactly where a competent pilot would set down. To maintain optimal tactical positioning, the 20 shock troopers inside died instantly, their advanced armor providing no protection against shaped charges. Designed to penetrate starship hulls, the second shuttle's pilot, seeing his wingman's destruction, pulled into an evasive climb. He made it almost 30 meters before a surface-to-air missile turned his craft into an expanding sphere of plasma and debris. Wreckage rained down across the colony like metallic hail. "You mined the entire landing zone," Krathevil realized. "I mined everything." Cortana's satisfaction was evident. The mining equipment wasn't just for show. We've had months to prepare. Every approach route, every landing site, every piece of cover your forces might use. This entire canyon is one massive kill box above them. The remaining shuttles aborted their landing attempts and pulled back to safe distance, but the damage was done. 40 more Dominion elite lay dead, and the fleet commanders were beginning to realize they'd been deceived. The radio frequencies erupted with angry transmissions as the truth became clear. The recorded messages had been too perfect to clean. Real combat communications were chaotic, fragmented, filled with the noise of dying men. The artificial recordings had been textbook perfect and therefore obviously false. Fleet command to all ground elements. A new voice cut through the chatter. Respond immediately with authentication codes. If no response is received within 10 minutes, we will commence orbital bombardment. Krathevil felt a grim satisfaction. Now you understand. My people don't accept defeat gracefully. They'll burn this world rather than let you have it. I'm counting on it. Cortana was doing something with her communications gear, connecting cables and adjusting frequencies with practiced efficiency. You see, while your friends were dying down there, they were also serving a very important purpose. She activated a long-range transmitter, and suddenly the tactical frequencies filled with new voices, human voices. Speaking perfect Dominion military vernacular, they reported massive casualty figures, described devastating human weapons, painted a picture of technological superiority that challenged everything the Dominion believed about their enemies. Psychological warfare, Krathevil said. Information warfare, she corrected. Much more sophisticated. We've been studying your species for months, learning your tactics, your psychology, your fears. Did you know that Dominion military doctrine specifically prohibits retreat from any engagement with inferior species? Pride makes you predictable. The implications were staggering. She was using his people's own xenophobic arrogance against them, turning military pride into a strategic weakness. The fleet commanders, faced with reports of impossible human capabilities, would be forced to choose between retreat, which their own regulations forbade, and escalation. Orbital bombardment of a single colony proves nothing, he said. Grasping for psychological advantage, the Dominion has 1,000 worlds, 1 million ships, and humanity has been preparing for this war since first contact. Her smile held. The cold promise of violence. You think this is about one colony, one planet? This is about sending a message to every species in the galaxy. Humans are not prey. The morning sky began to flicker with energy discharges as the Dominion fleet powered their bombardment arrays. Particle cannons that could crack continents began cycling up to full charge, their exotic matter reactors creating brief artificial suns in the orbital darkness. But something was wrong with the tactical display, where there should have been 12 ships maintaining bombardment formation. Energy signatures were scattered across a much wider area. Ships were breaking formation, moving erratically, their fire control systems apparently malfunctioning. What did you do? Krathevil demanded. I introduced them to some friends. Cortana pointed toward the horizon, where new stars were burning in the dawn sky. The Third Fleet was hiding behind Kepler 442c's moon, waiting for exactly this moment. 12 Dominion ships against 18 human vessels, much better odds. The space battle began as pinpricks of light dancing across the sky, but quickly escalated to visible explosions as shields failed and hulls breached. The Dominion fleet had expected to find a defenseless world. Instead, they'd flown into a carefully prepared ambush with human warships emerging from concealment at optimal attack positions. Through her communications gear, Cortana monitored both sides of the engagement. The humans fought with cold precision, targeting engines and weapons systems to disable rather than destroy. The Dominion forces, caught off guard and outmaneuvered, responded with the desperate fury of predators suddenly finding themselves outmatched. Humans don't just defend, she explained as explosions bloomed overhead. We hunt. 2 Dominion cruisers broke apart in cascading secondary explosions, their reactor cores breaching in flowers of nuclear fire. The remaining ships attempted to establish firing solutions on the planet's surface, but human vessels moved to intercept, their own weapons reaching out with surgical precision. Krathevil watched his people's fleet being systematically dismantled and felt something die inside his chest. The Dominion hadn't just underestimated human military capability. They'd completely misunderstood human nature. These weren't desperate defenders fighting for survival. They were predators who'd allowed their prey to walk into a trap. "The dreadnought carrier is moving to bombardment position," he observed, watching the massive vessel's energy signature intensify. "Even your fleet can't stop that much firepower." "No," Cortana agreed, "but they don't have to." She keyed a final sequence into her transmitter, and the sky above them erupted in light. The dreadnought's forward sections simply ceased to exist, consumed by an explosion that briefly outshone the binary stars. When the plasma cleared, only the ship's aft third remained, tumbling helplessly through space. "Antimatter charges," she explained casually, "placed by infiltration teams during your approach phase. Humans are very good at getting into places we don't belong." The remaining Dominion ships began broadcasting surrender signals, their commanders finally understanding the scope of their defeat. But Cortana's expression remained hard, unforgiving. "No surrender," she said into her radio. "No prisoners. Make sure they understand what happens when you threaten human civilians." Above them, the space battle continued with relentless brutality. The space battle above Kepler-4 had devolved into a three-dimensional slaughter that painted the sky in sheets of plasma and debris. What remained of the Dominion fleet, 6 heavily damaged cruisers and a handful of escorts, fought with the desperate fury of cornered animals, while the human Third Fleet methodically tightened their tactical noose through captured sensors. Cortana and Krathevil watched the largest space engagement in the sector's recorded history unfold in deadly silence. Ships died in bursts of light that took seconds to fade, each flash representing hundreds of lives snuffed out in the vacuum of space. "Dominion cruiser sector is breaking up," a human tactical officer reported over the radio. "Massive hull breach on decks 12 through 15. Survivors launching in escape pods." "Negative on pickup," came the cold reply from Fleet Command. "All Dominion personnel are to be considered hostile combatants. Continue engagement." Krathevil watched the escape pods streak away from his people's dying ship, small metal coffins carrying the last hopes of warriors who'd believed themselves invincible. The human vessels ignored them completely, focusing instead on the remaining combat-capable ships. "Your people are monsters," he whispered. "Your people came here to commit genocide." Cortana replied, without taking her eyes from the tactical display. "We're just returning the favor." The sector exploded in a cascade of secondary detonations as its antimatter containment finally failed. The expanding shockwave caught to nearby escorts, their shields collapsing under forces that could sterilize continents. In less than 30 seconds, 3 more ships and 1,500 lives had been added to the growing casualty count. But the Dominion forces weren't dying quietly. The cruiser Voltaron had managed to lock onto a human destroyer and was pouring concentrated fire into its forward sections. Armor plates the size of city blocks peeled away under particle beam bombardment, exposing the fragile machinery and human flesh beneath. USS Relentless reporting critical damage to forward reactor housing. The destroyer's captain transmitted, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. "We're losing containment on the primary fusion plant. All ships, this is Admiral Chen," came the fleet commander's response. "Form up on the Relentless and provide cover for her withdrawal." But the damaged destroyer wasn't retreating. Instead, it accelerated directly toward the Dominion battle line, its remaining weapons blazing defiance, even as internal explosions tore through its hull. "What are they doing?" Krathevil demanded. Cortana's expression was grim. "What humans do when cornered. Something insane." The Relentless struck the Voltaron amidships at 17% of light speed, its destabilized fusion reactor creating a brief star where 2 warships had been. The explosion vaporized both vessels instantly and sent shockwaves rippling through nearby formations. 2 more Dominion escorts tumbled out of control, their crews killed by radiation that penetrated their shielding like it was tissue paper. "Relentless is gone," Admiral Chen's voice carried across the tactical frequencies. "All hands lost." Add another 400 to the casualty list. The human fleet had lost its first major vessel, but the exchange ratio remained heavily in their favor. 7 Dominion ships destroyed for 1 human destroyer, mathematics written in blood and nuclear fire. The surviving Dominion cruisers began forming a desperate defensive formation, their combined point defense systems creating overlapping fields of fire that no missile could penetrate. It was a tactically sound response that might have worked against any conventional enemy. Humans, however, were anything but conventional. Yorktown and Saratoga, prepare for synchronized strike. Admiral Chen ordered, target the enemy formations. Center of mass, execute on my mark. The 2 human battleships moved with perfect coordination, their massive hulls sliding through space like prehistoric predators. They opened fire simultaneously, not with conventional weapons, but with something far more terrifying. Kinetic bombardment rounds, telephone pole-sized projectiles of dense metal, accelerated to significant fractions of light speed, began streaking toward the Dominion formation. There were no explosions, no energy discharges, just solid matter moving fast enough to punch through planetary crusts. The first round struck the lead Dominion cruiser and simply erased it. No explosion, no debris field. The ship was there, one moment and gone the next, converted to plasma so quickly that its atoms barely had time to register what was happening. "Thrakvar is gone," a Dominion communications officer reported, his voice breaking. "No life pods, no survivors. They just deleted us." 2 more cruisers died in similar fashion, their advanced shields and armor providing no protection against weapons that treated matter as an inconvenient suggestion. The survivors began broadcasting surrender signals, but Admiral Chen's response was swift and merciless. "All Dominion vessels will power down weapons and prepare for boarding. Any ship that attempts to withdraw will be destroyed immediately." But the Dominion commander, a veteran named Sekthal, who'd conquered 14 worlds, had one final card to play. His remaining ships suddenly broke formation and scattered, using their superior maneuverability to avoid the human kinetic strikes, while broadcasting a new type of signal. "Fleet distress beacon," Krathavel translated. "He's calling for reinforcements from where?" Cortana asked. "Your nearest fleet base is 6 weeks away." "From everywhere." Krathavel's expression held grim satisfaction. "That's a general alarm. Every Dominion ship within 50 light-years will respond." The tactical situation had just shifted dramatically. The humans had won the immediate engagement, but at the cost of revealing their position and capabilities to the entire Dominion war machine. Within days, perhaps hours, this system would be swarming with enemy vessels seeking revenge. Above them, the space battle continued as the surviving Dominion ships played a deadly game of cat and mouse among the orbital debris. Each side had taken tremendous casualties, thousands dead, entire ship crews vaporized in seconds, but the larger strategic picture was becoming clear. Humanity had just declared war on the galaxy's most powerful military force. "Your people have doomed themselves," Krathavel said. "This was supposed to be a simple punitive raid. Now it's become something much larger." Cortana checked her rifle's ammunition counter and smiled grimly. "Good. We were getting bored with small wars." The last Dominion cruiser exploded in a ball of plasma, its death marking the end of the space engagement. But on the ground, new problems were emerging as the first Dominion reinforcements began dropping out of hyperspace. The Dominion reinforcements arrived like a plague of metal locusts, their ships dropping out of hyperspace in perfectly choreographed formations that stretched across the system's outer perimeter. Admiral Ketmaya commanded the response fleet, 200 vessels ranging from fast attack craft to massive siege dreadnoughts capable of reducing planets to radioactive slag. "Scan complete," her tactical officer reported. 18 human vessels in close orbit around the 4th planet. Configuration suggests they're protecting something on the surface. Of course they are. Ketmaya's mandibles clicked with anticipation. "The same surface where they murdered my predecessor's entire strike force. We'll give them exactly what they deserve, on the planet below." Cortana watched the enemy fleet deployment through her rifle scope, counting ship signatures as they resolved. From hyperspace distortion, the human 3rd Fleet had taken defensive positions, round Kepler-4 for to be's smaller moon. But 18 ships against 200 was mathematics that even human ingenuity couldn't overcome. "Time to go," she said, cutting HFY's restraints with efficient movements. "Your ride's here." He rubbed circulation back into his wrists, studying her face. "You're releasing me? I'm giving you a choice." She handed him a human comm unit. "Contact your fleet and tell them there are human civilians in the underground shelters. Non-combatants who've never fired a shot in anger. Why would you trust me with this? Because you've seen what happens when your people underestimate mine." Her expression was stone. "And because what's coming next is going to make the last engagement look like a training exercise." Above them, the space around Kepler-4 to be erupted in light as the human fleet engaged the incoming Dominion forces. Admiral Chen had chosen to fight a delaying action, using the moon's gravity well and orbital debris to create tactical advantages. Against overwhelming numbers, the USS Yorktown died first, overwhelmed by concentrated fire from 6 heavy cruisers. Its death bought time for the Saratoga to retreat behind the moon's shadow. But the mathematics were inexorable. For every Dominion ship the humans destroyed, 3 more took its place. HFY spoke rapidly into the comm unit, broadcasting. "On Dominion command frequencies, Admiral Ketmaya, this is Ground Force Commander HFY. The human colony contains non-combatant civilians in hardened shelters. Request you delay orbital bombardment to allow extraction." "Ground Force Commander," the Admiral's voice carried cold amusement. "According to our records, your entire force was eliminated 6 hours ago, Mum. The situation on the ground is complex. The humans have demonstrated capabilities beyond our initial assessment." "Indeed they have." Her tone hardened. "Which is why this planet will be sterilized completely. No survivors, no witnesses. No chance for them to spread their technological advances to other human colonies." Cortana had been monitoring the transmission, and her face went pale. "They're not just going to bomb the colony. They're going to crack the entire planet." The tactical display confirmed her fears. The Dominion fleet was deploying planet-killer weapons antimatter warheads, powerful enough to shatter continental plates and boil away oceans. It was overkill on a scale that defied military logic, driven by rage and wounded pride rather than strategic necessity. "The shelters won't protect anyone from that," HFY said quietly. "Nothing will." But Cortana was already moving, her hands flying over portable equipment with desperate efficiency. "Maybe, maybe not. Depends on how good human engineers really are." She activated a buried transmitter, and suddenly the colony below them came alive with activity. Hidden blast doors slid open, revealing structures that had been concealed beneath the mining operation. What emerged wasn't defensive emplacements or weapons systems. It was a single massive communications ray, its dish tracking toward the outer system. "Quantum entanglement communicator," she explained, watching the array's targeting systems lock onto distant coordinates. "Instantaneous communication across galactic distances. We've been building a network of these things for the past 5 years." "Communicating with what?" HFY asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "With every human fleet, every human colony, every human military installation in known space." Her smile was sharp as a blade. "You wanted to send a message about Dominion power. Well, we're about to send one about human resolve." The array's transmission lasted exactly 37 seconds. When it finished, Cortana began systematically destroying the equipment with thermite charges, ensuring no trace would survive the coming bombardment. Above them, the space battle had reached its climax. The human Third Fleet made its final stand. Among the orbital debris, their ships dying one by one under overwhelming firepower. But each death was bought with maximum damage to Dominion forces. Kamikaze runs, reactor overloads, antimatter warheads detonated at point-blank range. "USS Constitution is gone," Admiral Chen reported, his flagship's hull glowing cherry red from particle beam impacts. "All remaining vessels execute Broken Arrow Protocol. Authorization Omega-77. HFY felt his blood chill. He'd studied human military terminology, and Broken Arrow meant only one thing: total commitment. No retreat, no surrender. The surviving human ships began accelerating toward the Dominion fleet at maximum burn, their crews accepting certain death in exchange for maximum enemy casualties. Madness. He whispered. Sanity, Cortana corrected. Your admiral wants to make an example of this world? Fine. But every species in the galaxy is going to know what it costs to threaten human civilians. The final moments of the space battle were visible even from the planet's surface. Ships collided at relativistic speeds, creating brief suns that outshone the system's binary stars. The USS Enterprise Admiral Chen's flagship took out 3 Dominion heavy cruisers in a mutual annihilation that left an expanding sphere of plasma, where 4 vessels had fought their final duel. When the light faded, only Dominion ships remained in orbit. Nearly 60 vessels had been destroyed in the engagement, but Admiral HFY's fleet still outnumbered the original human force by 10 to 1. The victory was complete, overwhelming, and entirely Pyrrhic. Begin planetary bombardment, the Admiral ordered. I want this world reduced to cosmic dust. The first antimatter warheads began falling toward HFY's surface like metallic rain. Each one carried enough destructive power to vaporize a city, and there were hundreds of them. The planet's end was mathematically certain. Nothing could survive what was coming. But as the warheads descended, space around the system began to flicker with new rivals, human ships. Hundreds of them. They emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation, their hulls bearing the insignia of a dozen different fleets: the 7th Fleet from Proxima Centauri, the 12th Fleet from Wolf 359, the 1st Fleet from Sol itself, Earth's home defense force mobilized for the first time in 50 years. Contact, Admiral HFY's tactical officer reported, his voice tight with disbelief. 300 human vessels, all classes. They're everywhere. The quantum communication array had done its work. In 37 seconds, it had transmitted detailed tactical information about Dominion capabilities, fleet compositions, and strategic intentions to every human military command in known space. The response had been swift, coordinated, and absolutely devastating in its implications. Humanity hadn't just been building colonies and trade routes for the past century. They'd been building the largest military force in galactic history. All Dominion vessels. Came a new voice over the communications channels, speaking perfect Dominion military vernacular. This is Fleet Admiral Harrison of the United Earth Space Navy. You have 60 seconds to stand down and surrender, or we will demonstrate why attacking human civilians is a mistake your species will never repeat. Admiral HFY's response was immediate and predictable. We do not negotiate with inferior species. All vessels. Engage the humans. The second battle of HFY began with an exchange of fire that lit up half the system. But this time, the mathematics favored humanity. 300 ships against 140, with the humans holding tactical advantage and coordinate targeting. The battle lasted 18 minutes. When it ended, space around the planet was filled with cooling debris and the scattered wreckage of what had once been the Dominion's 7th Battle Fleet. A few escape pods tumbled through the void, their occupants the only survivors of a force that had arrived expecting easy victory. Cortana watched the final explosions fade and keyed her radio. Fleet Command, this is ground control. Planet is secure. Repeat, planet is secure. You can call off the cavalry. Negative, ground control. Admiral Harrison's voice crackled through the static. The cavalry's just getting started. On the horizon, more ships were dropping out of hyperspace. Not human vessels this time, but alien craft bearing unfamiliar configurations. Ships belonging to species that had suffered under Dominion rule for centuries, finally given hope by humanity's demonstration of successful resistance. The war was spreading. What have you done? Crathival asked quietly. Cortana shouldered her rifle and began walking toward the extraction point, where human shuttles were landing to collect survivors. We've given the galaxy a choice: bow to the Dominion or stand with humanity. Behind them, the communications array's wreckage still smoldered, but its message had already traveled across the stars. In a dozen systems, on 100 worlds, other species were making the same calculation that had brought Admiral Harrison's fleet across half the galaxy. The Dominion had ruled through fear and superior technology, but humanity had just demonstrated something more powerful than either: the willingness to die rather than submit, and the capability to make that sacrifice count. 6 months after the Battle of HFY, the galaxy looked very different. The Terran Independence Coalition controlled 47 star systems and commanded the loyalty of 18 different species. What had begun as humanity's desperate defense of a single mining colony had evolved into the largest rebellion in galactic history. The Dominion, accustomed to ruling through fear and technological superiority, found themselves facing an enemy that refused to acknowledge either advantage. Fleet Admiral Vex Cortana, promoted after her tactical innovations at HFY, became standard doctrine throughout human space, stood on the bridge of the UES Vindication, watching Dominion ships surrender in the Altair system. The enemy fleet had arrived expecting to face primitive human defenses. Instead, they'd found a joint task force of human, Velter, and Zephyrian vessels using coordinated tactics that the Dominion military had never encountered. "That's the last of them," her tactical officer reported. Dominion Admiral Felthick requests terms for his remaining ships. "Standard terms," Cortana replied. "Crews to be repatriated to Dominion space with the understanding that any hostile action against Coalition worlds will result in immediate retaliation against Dominion civilian targets. Their ships to be impounded and studied for technological advancement." It was a pattern that had repeated across dozens of systems. The Dominion's military machine, built for crushing resistance through overwhelming force, proved incapable of adapting to guerrilla warfare on a galactic scale. Human-trained insurgents struck supply lines, liberated prison worlds, and turned the Dominion's own technological advantages against them through captured equipment and reverse engineering. "Mum," her communications officer called out. "Priority. Transmission from Earth. President Morrison wants to speak with you personally." The holographic display activated, revealing the weathered face of humanity's elected leader. Behind him, the lights of Geneva glittered through the windows of the World Council chambers. "Admiral Cortana," Morrison said, "I have news from the diplomatic front. The Dominion High Council has requested a formal ceasefire and negotiation of terms." It was the moment they'd been working toward for months. The proud Dominion, rulers of 1,000 worlds, finally acknowledging that they could neither conquer nor contain humanity's rebellion. "What are they offering?" Cortana asked. "Recognition of human territorial claims in 47 systems, formal diplomatic relations, and technology exchanges." Morrison's expression was carefully neutral. "In exchange, we end military support for resistance movements in Dominion space. And you're going to accept? That depends on you. Admiral, you've been fighting this war from the beginning. What's your assessment of our strategic position?" Cortana considered the question carefully. Through the viewports, she could see the surrendered Dominion ships being escorted to impoundment facilities by Coalition vessels. The enemy fleet had been state-of-the-art 6 months ago. Now it was barely competitive with human technology. "Mr. President, the Dominion is finished as a galactic power. They can't adapt to our tactics, can't match our technology development, and can't maintain control over their subject species. The ceasefire offer is just buying time for them to figure out how to contain the rebellion. So you recommend we continue the war? I recommend we end it completely." Her expression hardened. "No ceasefires, no negotiations, no diplomatic solutions. We keep fighting until the Dominion government surrenders unconditionally and agrees to liberation of all their subject worlds." Morrison leaned back in his chair. "That's a hell of a demand, Admiral. The Dominion still controls 500 star systems for now, but every month we fight, more species join the Coalition. Every victory proves that the Dominion isn't invincible. Give me another year, and I'll deliver their capital world, and the cost in human lives." It was the question that haunted every military commander, the mathematics of blood and victory that no amount of technology could eliminate. Cortana thought of the men and women who'd died at HFY, of Admiral Chen's sacrifice, of the thousands more who'd given their lives in the months since. "Less than the cost of leaving them in power," she said finally. "The Dominion rules through genocide and slavery, Every day they remain in control, millions die. We end this now, or we condemn the galaxy to centuries more suffering. Morrison was quiet for a long moment. You have authorization to continue operations, Admiral. May God have mercy on us all. The transmission ended, leaving Cortana alone with her thoughts and the weight of command. Through her personal communicator, she heard a familiar voice. Quite a speech, Crathival said. He'd become her unofficial advisor on Dominion psychology and tactics, his knowledge of their military culture proving invaluable. Though I notice you didn't mention the real reason you won't negotiate, which is, humans don't negotiate with predators, you eliminate them. It was true, though she'd never have admitted it publicly. The war had changed humanity's relationship with the galaxy permanently. They'd learned that survival required more than defensive capability, it required the willingness to hunt down any threat to human civilians, no matter how distant or powerful. Status report on Operation Ragnarok. She asked. Phase 3 is complete. Our deep reconnaissance teams have infiltrated 17 major Dominion worlds. When you give the word, their entire communication network goes dark. Their fleet coordination collapses, and local resistance movements receive enough weapons to overthrow planetary governments. It was elegant in its simplicity. Rather than fighting the Dominion's military directly, humanity had chosen to attack their political structure. Every conquered species harbored resentment against their oppressors. All they needed was coordination and equipment to turn that resentment into revolution. Timeline for implementation, 72 hours. Once we trigger the uprisings, the Dominion government will have maybe a week before their empire dissolves completely. Cortana nodded, then activated her fleet communications. All ship commanders, this is Admiral Cortana. Prepare for Operation Ragnarok. In 3 days, we end this war. Across the Coalition fleet, human and alien crews began final preparations for the largest coordinated military operation in galactic history. Not a battle between fleets, but a simultaneous uprising across hundreds of worlds that would shatter the Dominion's political control forever. The war that had begun with a single sniper protecting a mining colony was about to end with the liberation of half the galaxy. Later, in her private quarters, Cortana cleaned her rifle with the same methodical precision she'd used on Kepler 440b. The weapon had seen action on a dozen worlds, its scope calibrated for alien atmospheres and its trigger worn smooth by countless engagements. She thought about the alien sniper who'd started it all, confident in his superiority right up until the moment she'd disarmed him. The Dominion had made the same mistake on a galactic scale. They'd assumed that humanity's apparent weakness was real, that their technological advantages were permanent. That fear was stronger than freedom. They'd been wrong about all of it. In 72 hours, the galaxy would learn what humans had always known. Predators exist to be hunted, and every hunter eventually becomes prey. The alien sniper had blinked. Humanity never would.